The Iran-Iraq War is the most disgusting stain on humanity since World War II. I can't say I've ever read a more crooked story. All characters involved are villains. No side has a good reason for bloodshed. The most powerful men in society using violence to protect their ego or personal economic interest. Most powerful nations in the world picking a side or sometimes picking both. Yup, sounds like a 20th century border war. This war began ostensibly with the Iraqi invasion of Iran. Truly, though, the conflict goes back to 632 AD and the death of the Prophet Muhammad. At the time of his death, his empire and religion spread to most of what we know now as the Middle East, and the two main sects would be Shi'atu Ali, or partisans of Ali, those that believe a more qualified individual should rule the Islamic world, and Sunnis, followers of the Sunnah, or Way. They believe the crown should go to Muhammad's cousin. For some reason, 1400 years later, people still think this is a legitimate reason to slaughter each other. For hundreds of years, Persia, or modern-day Iran, was a seat of Sunni learning. Muslim empires sent their ulama, or Islamic scholars, from far and wide to learn the teachings of Muhammad. Sunni Iranians were powerful during this era. Around 1500, though, a marauding Kurdish Shiite born in the northwestern foothills of Iran would change the trajectory of this region forever. His warband began conquering and consolidating territory quickly, and by 1508, he controlled most of modern Iran. There's one thing Ismail hated more than people not living under his boot, it was those people practicing Sunni Islam. He began work immediately eradicating any trace of the old guard, ordering traditional curses be cast on the last several rulers of Persia and offering all Sunni ulama a choice of conversion, death, or exile. Shia ulama were brought in from other regions to take their place. In hindsight, historians agree this massive conversion of society was done to create a more cohesive Iranian identity and weaponize it against their natural archenemy, the Ottoman Empire. The beginning of Shia Islam in Iran bear a stark resemblance to its use in the war we discuss. In 1979, the Islamic Revolution happened in Iran. Ruhollah Khomeini, a religious cleric and rebel leader, overthrew the historical Iranian royal family and Western-backed Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. It scared the absolute shit out of the dictator of Iraq, Saddam Hussein. Not only did he fear such a revolution would occur there and result in his ouster, but he saw Iran as fractured and disorganized after the revolution. An opportunity for easy territorial gains in his mind. September 23, 1980, 6 Iraqi divisions crossed into Iran over some 644 kilometers of border, their main target being the oil-rich Khuzestan to the south. 2 of the divisions were sent north into Iran to cut off invasion routes into Baghdad, with the other 4 heavy armor and mechanized divisions being sent south. They hoped to inspire a Sunni insurgency in that region, but were met with somewhat mediocre reception. Saddam showed the world early that his intentions were not to follow the rules. He deployed chemical weapons that day in the Battle of Susangerd. Now's as good a time as any to state the obvious. The Iran-Iraq War was essentially World War I, but with modern equipment. I know what you're thinking. Hey, I've seen this before. But, before the current conflict in Ukraine, this was an extremely novel idea. Everything was on the table. Iran had a massive population fueled by religious fervor that they were willing to sacrifice all of to continue a Shia state. Iraq possessed their now legendary WMDs, largely American and Soviet chemical weapons from the turn of the century that were easily reversible and easily mass-produced. Also, their storehouses were overflowing with the finest equipment the Soviet Union could source at the time. USSR being a natural enemy to theocratic countries, especially those on its border. After their initial invasion was beaten back, Iraq's offensive capability was largely destroyed for the rest of the war. 2 months after the invasion of Iran, Saddam announced that his forces would be on the defensive. Here, the world would get the first glimpse of the extremes Khomeini was willing to push. Before the '79 revolution, their military was large and well respected internationally. After it saw some 60% desertion rate, with most competent leadership being wiped out in a purge. This coincides with the creation of the Basij, or Army of 20 million. It consisted of basically every Iranian male aged 12 to 70 that could still dig a hole or hold a rifle. These militiamen would be organized in groups of 22 volunteers at a local mosque and then transported to the front, where a squad would have their objective and surge forward with hundreds of other groups at the same time in a coordinated attack. More similar to the assault waves we've seen in the last few months around Bakhmut than the Chinese human waves of the Korean War. When met with layered Iraqi defenses, young boys were expected to carry out these attacks with virtually no chance of success and oftentimes no chance of survival. When the assault came upon a minefield, child soldiers already ordained in life as martyrs would be ordered to walk through the minefield to clear the way for vehicles and the better armed Revolutionary Guard forces. When stopped by barbed wire, they'd lay on top of it so their comrades could step over them. These young men were given cheap, stamped keys, and they were told they would need it to enter heaven. It became quickly apparent to Saddam that he would not be able to defeat the shit-pile horde of pissed-off Iranians he stepped in, so he moved to destroy their morale. He began a campaign of air raids on civilian centers in Iran in the hopes that it would break their will to fight. Raids largely had the opposite effect, strengthening the average Iranian's resolve and increasing their hatred of Iraqis and Sunnis at large. Not to be outdone, though, Iran ordered their own strikes against the Iraqi capital of Baghdad. Very little was accomplished by either side other than tens of thousands of innocent deaths in an arms race that saw theater ballistic missiles purchased by both sides and slowed to massive losses of aircraft. As the war moved to its midpoint and turned down into the trench warfare slog the world had become familiar with, Iran continued its human wave attacks, losing thousands of young boys in the process while not being able to take advantage of the massive sacrifice. Stagnation continued with battles being raged along the front for almost 7 years and very little territory gained by either side. In the desert, collectively, both countries would lose close to 1 million soldiers. A particular development of interest was the so-called Tanker Wars, a series of exocet strikes by Iraq against anybody transiting the Strait of Hormuz in an attempt to draw the United States into the war. Iran responded by sinking several Gulf states supporting Iraq by transporting their oil, causing one incident where a pair of Saudi F-15s intercepted and shot down a flight of Iranian F-4 Phantoms. Most notably, on the 17th of May 1987, 2 Iraqi Exocet missiles struck the U.S. Navy guided missile frigate Start, leading to the death of 37 sailors on board. Outrage struck the U.S. homeland, and a sense of a score needed to be settled would resonate in the country for decades. Seawise Giant, the largest ship ever built, was also struck by Iraqi missiles while transporting Iranian oil. You see the trend in this war. One of these geriatric rapists decides to do something vile and the other one responds with the same or even worse levels of inhumanity. At no point was anybody around either of these men brave or powerful enough to stop the killing. Both sides were a shell of their former selves and in ruin. Trillions of dollars not to the sands of time but the Arabian desert. Ego at the cost of a generation of Iraqi and Iranian men. The gain from this war was international embarrassment. Thought this Iraq would never recover and eventually America would get their revenge, tenfold. Iran still reeling politically from this war and the struggle between Shia and Sunnis renewed against the new foe in Saudi Arabia. Iran is actively funding and supporting Houthi rebels against the Saudi and Yemeni government and Shia terrorism worldwide. The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Alright, members only. Ahí gracias.
Midnight Society.
There you go.
Turn up.
Let me up a little bit. We're all good with some.
It's the virus.